So this is just something I decided I'd throw together last minute. I know it's super late for me to be streaming, especially something like this, but I figured I'd rather do it now while it's on my mind just so I can get it done with. So I'm going to, similar to what I did with Namco games a couple months back, I'm going to be taking, actually I probably should turn cursor capture on, should I? There. Is it visible now? I can't tell. It's not visible, come on. Okay, I guess cursor capture just isn't gonna work. Alright, whatever. So, I'm going to be placing all of these Gradius, Salamander, and Parodius games into a tier list. I have a few more tiers than I did with my Namco games. I'm going to try to kind of follow the standard S, A, B, D, C, D, and F tier format. And then this is the bottom of the barrel tier. I like to pretend this game doesn't exist. There will be a couple games in here. And then I'm just going to run through the games real quick, because in addition to all the games I've played, there are some missing from this list that I might add later, just in case anybody else wants to use this. But the games are Gradius 2 NES, Parodius MSX, I think this is Gokujo Parodius Arcade, Gokujo Parodius SNES, Gradius Arcade, Gradius Gaiden, Gradius Galaxies, Gradius 2 Arcade, Gradius 2 PC Engine, Gradius 3 Arcade, Gradius 3 SNES, Gradius 4, Gradius NES, Gradius PC Engine, Gradius Rebirth, Jukio Strawberry Parodius for PlayStation Sega Saturn, Jukio Strawberry Parodius SNES, Nemesis 2 for MSX, what is this? I think that's Da Arcade, Parodius Da Game Boy, Parodius Da NES, Parodius Da PC Engine, Parodius Da SNES, and then Salamander 2. Actually, wait, I'm missing one. Fuck, hold on. Let's see. I forgot. We need a Life Force JP Arcade art. Is there even art for this? You know what? I think I'm just gonna. No, I don't know what I want to use for that. I'm trying to add a Life Force JP. You know what? We'll just use the title screen. Life Force JP Arcade, and then edit template. You don't get to see any of this. Choose files. There we go. All right, that should be good. Okay, there we go. So now we have Life Force JP here at the bottom. Yeah, Salamander 2, Salamander Arcade, Salamander PC Engine. Fuck, I don't have Life Force any. This is already really scuffed, but I don't care. Alright, we'll just use this, I suppose. It's as good as any other. Okay, this should be complete now. This should be a complete list for me now. Let's wait for the tier list to load again. There. Alright. Salamander 2, Salamander Arcade, Salamander PC Engine, Sexy Parodius, Gradius 5, Life Force JP Arcade, and then Life Force NES. So I'm just going to go in order. So we'll start with Gradius 2 for the Famicom. I have not touched this game. I'm pretty sure since the last time I 1cc'd it for my for my old YouTube channel, which would have been, what, 2014? It's definitely not in my top tiers, but I'll give it C tier. So I'm generally not a big fan of just NES or Famicom games in general, even those that are like ports of arcade games, but I think this game is pretty alright. There is a lot of stuff that got cut from the game, obviously because of the hardware limitations and all that crap. And a lot of stages are just weirdly combined, like they combine the volcano and crystal stages into one stage, essentially. Shortened some stages, took out some bosses. But I do think this game, it's definitely a very, like, ambitious title for the NES, which you can tell because there's sprite flicker and slow down literally everywhere in the game. And I will admit this is one of the few NES games that actually has music that I like, specifically Overheat and Farewell and Fortress, which are songs exclusive to this version, I think are serious bangers. And I don't usually say that about NES music, but overall I'd say it's nice. It's nice that they were able to actually include the voiceovers. I think it's hilarious that Gopher's speech in this version is literally just slowed down replays of the voice samples for the power-ups. I think that's just hilarious. The other thing that's kind of neat about this game is that it does have the option rotate feature that you essentially use as your fifth option, which is kind of pointless, but it's neat that they included that. All right. Parodius for the MSX. So technically, I've only played the PSP port, which is not exactly like the original, but I'll count it. I am going to put this game in D tier, but it's very close to C tier. This game, Parodius for the MSX, this is the first Parodius game. As with every other Gradius MSX title with the SCC chip, the music is just absolutely spectacular. I think this game has a criminally underrated soundtrack compared to some of the other Parodius games. But the problem with this game is just some of the stage ideas and some of the boss ideas are just so horrendously implemented. They're ideas that sound nice on paper, but they don't work well in the game. Like, I think there's three in particular that really stand out to me. The first one is the three-choice hand, which is like the boss of stage 2, where you essentially play rock, paper, scissors, and you have a 1 in 3 chance of losing and then getting sent back to the beginning of the level, which no, that doesn't work. You're basically relying on chance there, and Gradius 3 Arcade has that problem too, where there's a section that's entirely dependent on chance, but this game just has it even worse. Because at least in Gradius 3 Arcade, it's like, even with the worst RNG, there's still, like, mild potential. In this game, it's just, if you choose wrong and get unlucky, you're just screwed. The volcano, or, like, the cavern sub-boss, where all the rocks fall through the ceiling, I can pretty much never get past that without pause buffering. And then you have, like, the dead-end wall in the final stage, which requires a specific bell power to get past, which I haven't reached that section in a while, but I don't recall having too many issues with that. But there are some elements of this game I like. I think the, like, candy stage, I think it's the one with the Hot Lips boss, where you kind of go through all the passageways and you can wrap from the top of the screen to the bottom. I think that's a really cool stage. And then I think the idea of the bonus stages, which are the same as the ones from Gradius MSX, and then having like miniature versions of the Nemesis 2 MSX boxes, I think that's kind of cool. But then just some of the bosses in this game are just in general pretty lame, and on the PSP port they take way too much damage or are just completely invincible for some stupid reason. So yeah, I think that's probably an opinion that a lot of Gradius fans would agree with. Is this game just It has its shining moments, especially with the soundtrack, but it's just not designed very well. And, like, all of the you can choose between 5 different characters, but they're the same freaking thing. Like, there's nothing different about them. But the story of this game is kind of hilarious. I do think the story of this game, like, if you look up an English translation of it, it's pretty comical. But So I'm not cruel enough to put this game in one of the bottom 2 tiers, but it's definitely low. Now, this is Gokujo Parodius Arcade. I think I'm going to put this game in A tier, our first super high tier. I actually really like this game. It's not quite S tier. It's not there. That has to be like super good. And there'll probably be like only one. There's one game that for sure is going to go there, and another that might. We'll probably have like one or two others, but now I will say the one thing this game doesn't have going for it, which is the same issue that every other Parodius arcade game has, is its rank. It is absolutely horrendous. Like, it's not as bad as Da or Sexy Parodius in terms of rank, but it can turn into bullet hell pretty quickly, especially once you get to like the special stage. My God, that stage is, it's fun to learn. It's fun to do once you learn it, but until you learn it, you just die every 5 seconds, and it's just. But I think Gokujo does the difficulty balance right. It's not like Da or Sexy in the point where like you'll have if you're absolutely terrible at managing rank, you'll maybe reach this point, but like you're not going to have suicide bullets by stage 3. You can like, and it's at the rank level, I'd say, is at the point, at least until the special stage, where it's at the very least manageable, as if you practice it and sort of get a feel for the game. And then just everything else about the game, like it has a superb soundtrack. It's so satisfying to get good bell chains in here, especially with the purple bell being introduced. A lot of the bosses are really cool. There's the Moai Battleship special stage, which I don't really like that it can appear randomly, because it likes to appear for me sometimes after I've just died to like a boss and have absolutely no power-ups. But some of my favorite stages, I like the highway stage, even though I absolutely suck at it. The Space Hit Parade stage is really cool. The Rabbit Princess boss is so stupidly fast, and the stage itself is also insanely difficult, but I love the concept and the theme of it. And the final stage, I like. It's basically just a ripoff of Gradius 2's final stage, but I think the whole nightclub aspect of it is super fun. And then, so this is probably my favorite to play of the Parodius arcade games, if we're not going to count Da on the PlayStation and Sega Saturn and PSP, because I will have to take that into consideration when I rank that game. But this is probably the most fair of the 3 games, I would say. Now the SNES port, this gets bottom of the barrel. Such a garbage port of this game. Like, and actually, I'm gonna go ahead. Jikyo Strawberry Parodius for SNES goes there as well. I don't like these 2 ports. They suck. The music just isn't good, at least compared to the arcade version of Gokujo and then the PlayStation version of Jikyo Strawberry. They have horrible frame rate issues. Like, they slow down, pretty much. The games run at like 50% speed most of the time because of how much of a toll it takes. And especially with Jikyo Strawberry, the bosses just take forever. And I'll give them credit for being console games, and also for toning down the difficulty a little bit so that they're more accessible for console players instead of arcade players. But they just fucking suck. Like, Da SNES was actually really good. I'll definitely rank that one way higher. Alright. Gradius, the original. So this is the arcade version, and this I should have put Scramble on here, but fuck it, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do that a 4th time. All right. Where do I want to drop this one? Thinking C tier for Gradius Arcade. It's really hard with this one because it's the game that's, if you don't count Scramble, it's basically the game that started it all. There's not a whole lot to say about it. It's other than, again, it's really the start of the franchise. Kind of got the core gameplay mechanics in. Kind of introduced some of the classic Gradius songs like Challenger 1985, Free Flyer, and Aircraft Carrier, and of course you got Big Core, which is one of the best bosses in video game history. no questions allowed or no arguments allowed. And then the PlayStation, Sega Saturn, and PSP ports have the absolutely magnificent ending piano rendition, which I freaking love. But I feel like the game's kind of in its place now, and especially compared to some of the later games in the series, it's pretty basic. And, like, you have Stage 4, which is literally just Stage 1 but upside down, and then Stage 5 is just a bunch of tentacle golems, and literally no terrain whatsoever. And you have Big Core as the boss for the first 5 stages, but you do have the sub-bosses, which kind of helps. And then the option control mechanics are kind of clunky, and the laser doesn't always work sometimes. But it's not a bad game. It definitely, I feel like it ages reasonably well. So that's kind of where I am with that. Also, Morning Music is a banger. I know that's not exclusive to Gradius, but it's a depth song. It's my alarm on my phone. Right? Gaiden. Hold on. Gaiden is like god tier. Like, this tier could almost just be Gaiden. Like, it's easily the best Gradius game in the series, like, and it's not even a competition. Like, it has by far the most balanced, I'd say it has by far the most balanced difficulty of any Gradius game, to the point where learning it is a challenge, but then once you learn it, it becomes like super, it becomes a super enjoyable game to play, especially when you like are able to 1cc it pretty, it's an easy game to learn to 1cc, but it's, like, not easy enough that it verges on, like, being Gradius Rebirth or whatever. Also, probably has the best soundtrack in the series, especially the boss rush songs, every song for the final stage, the ending theme, the, like, pre-stage air battle themes, just every song in this game is just, like, Speed, which is the high-speed stage theme, is easily the best song in the game. They composed that song beautifully to sort of work along with the stage. And this game just has a lot of innovative ideas with it, too. Like, you can customize the order of your power-up bar, even though I always leave it at the default because I'm not a wuss and I don't want to abuse limit every 5 seconds. And recovering in this game isn't that hard anyways. Skill issue. But, the stages just have, like, such creative ideas in them. Like, Stage 1... like, especially when you get to the higher loops where they add stuff in, like in Stage 1, the waterfalls push you down. Stage 2 has the branching path with different bosses. Stage 3 has, like, the reflection lights. Stage 4, they add 2 Y heads to Y dimension on higher loops. Stage 6 has a boss that sort of evolves into 3 different things. In Stage 7, you have a black hole literally tearing apart the stage behind you. The boss rush is easily the best boss rush in the series, and then Stage 9 is just... And OVUM is probably the best final boss in the series, just because of the way it taunts you, and just the atmosphere and the music. And then the 4 ships, I think, it's a cool concept, but they're not very balanced in power, because the J-Knight has the round laser, which just shields you from everything. Falchion Beta has the gravity bullet, which is incredibly OP, and the Lord British is just useless, so I use the Vic Viper. But that's, like, mild complaint. This game is just god tier. I really want to play this game again. I haven't really played any of these games recently. I just haven't really had a reason to. Should probably do that again at some point. May the 4th is coming up, so I'll probably do something then. But Gaiden, easily my favorite game in the series. So it's deserving of this tier. Gradius Galaxies, aka Gradius Generation, aka Gradius Advance. I think I'm going to give this B tier. I like Gradius Galaxies. Like, the music is composed well. It just doesn't really work with the sound font they choose to use, the really, like, NES sounding GBA sound font. But it works all right. Like, the arrangements by I think it's Jorge Fuentes, I think, are those are really good demonstrations of those songs. I think Galaxies, for a GBA Gradius game, this is actually surprisingly really, really good. I think the weapon arrangements are super nice. How they added they have the double upgrade features, and the double, for example, when you double upgrade it, it's like Gaiden where it adds a third shot going behind you, and that was something cool that they brought back. There's some cool ideas in this game as well. Like, probably the most interesting one is the Resurrection Core after the high speed stage in stage 8, which is like a core warship that revives itself a couple times before you can finally kill it. What else is there? And there's a couple other gems sort of sprinkled out through there. I'd say kind of the difficulty aspect for this game, it's alright, I'd say, in terms of being a balanced game for difficulty. I think where it kind of falls apart is that on normal difficulty, it becomes bullet hell surprisingly fast, but it's usually not a big deal if you kill everything as soon as it appears. The cell stage is the worst stage in the game. Just no. The regenerating walls are too fast. The arm enemies are fucking annoying as hell. And it's like if you die, the stage it's recoverable but not fun. And same with like the gun wall, and like some of the parts of the game are just scary. Like the gun wall, easily one of the worst gun walls. Where would you rank up the Automatius games? I haven't played the Automatius games. This is just games that I've played, and I'm not doing any compilations. I don't really feel like I should count those. And for whenever I mention an arcade game, that includes all compilation ports of it. So Gradius, arcade, PlayStation, Sega Saturn, PSP, and DS, for example. And arcade archives, I suppose. Okay, so that's kind of where I am with Galaxies. I like the challenge modes on the Japanese version. I don't have the Japanese version, of course, but I think that's kind of cool. There's the whole like hint system for recovering at every checkpoint, which is kind of nice. And then the 5,000 point bonuses are really fun to find and really fun to collect. Those really help boost your score. So overall, I like the game. It's just not good enough for the higher tiers, I'd say. Okay, Gradius 2 Arcade. I had to use the title screen for this. This is one of the games I had to use the title screen for because I couldn't find good art of it for this tier list. I think I'm also going to put this in B tier. B tier is probably going to be the most filled, I'd say. Although that is debatable. A lot of people give Gradius 2 sort of praise for being the best game in the series. Obviously, as you can tell, I don't agree with that. But I like it. It introduces a lot of the staples of the series, like the boss rush, some of the high-speed stage, some of the volcano and Y stage elements, and some of the final stage elements, like the gun wall and the shadow dancers, and the option hunter, which everybody loves. It also introduced new weapon sets. The music in this game is solid all around, pretty much. There's really no songs in this game that are bad, and honestly, I could say the same for most of these games, except for Gradius NES and Life Force NES. Those two games, I just don't. I don't like NES music in general. But and then Gradius 2 Arcade it's definitely a really balanced game. Because as long as you don't die, if you don't die, this game is an absolute breeze. But I think Andrew98 said it best, where this game definitely sort of introduced Gradius syndrome, where there are certain checkpoints, especially in the final stage, where you can die and there's just absolutely no chance of recovering. And actually, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do this now. This is the PC Engine port. I'm actually going to put this in A tier. Even though it's basically the exact same game, but with an extra stage, I think just the fact that this game plays so well on the PC Engine Super CD, and that I love how the music sounds in this port, because it uses CD-ROM audio music, so it sounds exactly like the arcade version, but it has a really nice echo effect to it. it does have some like slowdown and sprite flicker issues at times, but that's just kind of the nature of the hardware. But I'd say both of these games are really cool. Although this game is probably a little bit harder than this one mostly due to screen resolution issues. But yeah, I do agree these are both pretty balanced games. They're about par for the course, I'd say. I don't really have much to say about them. Okay, Gradius 3 Arcade. Oh boy. Where am I dropping this one? This game is so controversial. Like, I want to put this game, like, if I had a choice, I would, if it were up to me, I would put this game in A tier. But this game is just so poorly programmed. I'm gonna give it B tier. I think ambitious is the word I would use to describe this game for sure. It's definitely one of the most ambitious games in the series. There are a lot of ideas that this game introduces that I actually really like. The final stage, the base stage of this game, is easily one of my favorite base stages. I just love how it's like one obstacle after another. And even certain other stages, like I think some of the Y stage concepts are cool, just very poorly implemented, the 3D high-speed stage. And then the boss rush stage is super cool, how like the bosses all come out of the ground and then you go into the final crater hole. And then what's even crazy is that if you look on the cutting room floor page for this game, what we got is only about like 60% of what was actually planned for the game. And this game's soundtrack is amazing. It's like, it's not quite up to the tier of Gaiden or even like 4 or 5, but it's certainly up there. But then I have to address this game's flaws. Yeah, hitboxes. I'd say hitboxes and checkpoints are the two biggest flaws with this game. I don't think I really need to go much into that, because I think everybody who's played this game knows how terrible both of those things are. And obviously I can't mention, like, Vaff, the Moai stage boss, literally impossible to kill with certain weapon types. Crystal stage being dependent on the Crystal Rush being dependent on block is just dumb. Like, it's just dumb. Recovering in the game is basically impossible in pretty much the entire game, except for like 3 different places. Slowdown does kind of hinder the experience a little bit, but not really. It's like there's certain parts of the game that rely on slowdown, and I think that might be a little bit of an issue. And I think the SNES version suffers from the same thing. Really. But which is the boss? There's, I think, a few. I know Dogus, the pre-boss for the Moai stage, there's actually a consistent setup you could use to glitch him into just spinning around in circles and never attacking you, so you can just time him out. And then I think both Wyvern and Vulture Dragon, which are stage 7, can also just not take damage, and you have to time them out. But then Vulture Dragon has the hilarious quick kill you can do with a Mega Crash. And that's another thing about this game that I like, is sort of the different weapon setups and how it introduces the weapon edit. I don't think that the weapon configurations they had set out for you were very well made. Like, because they're just so horribly imbalanced. Like, Type B is just so much better than any other possible weapon configuration. Even the ones you can make in edit mode. And it kind of makes the whole concept of the weapon edit kind of redundant, because it's like it doesn't really help you unless you have like a really, really good weapon setup. But yeah, it's like I love certain aspects of this game, and I definitely think this is one of my favorite games to play through, especially for 1cc attempts. This is definitely one of my favorite games to do, but there's just so much shit in this game that it just sucks. But I still love I love the effort they put into the game. I love the soundtrack. I love a lot of the ideas, and there are certain design choices that I do like. So I think B tier is a good spot for this game. And then the SNES port, I think of these two games, I have a hard time comparing these two games because they're, despite this being a port of the arcade game, they're just so different from one another in just about every aspect possible. Like, obviously, Gradius 3 SNES fixes a lot of the shit that Gradius 3 Arcade got wrong, but in the process, I also feel like the game is a little more watered down and less ambitious, kind of to the style of Gradius 2, which, I mean, Gradius 2 is still a decent game, but I think Gradius 3 Arcade was definitely really well designed. Yeah, the slowdown... This is, again, another game where it feels like slowdown does hinder the experience, but when you look at, like, the SA1 playthroughs, it feels like this game was designed with slowdown in mind, which is something I don't really mind. Now, for Gokujo and Jikyo Strawberry Parodius on SNES, it's a big problem, but for Gradius 3 SNES, I don't really mind it too much. It is helpful at times, and, like, it's part of the experience for this game, whereas for the Parodius games, I like playing the games without slowdown on the more advanced, on, like, the higher quality versions. And then with this game, you also have the formation options and reduce, which just breaks the freaking game open. It's like, as long you can basically have any weapon setup you want as long as you have those two, and you're pretty much good to go for the entire game. It's kind of lame, but the soundtracks for these two games, I'd say, are comparable. I like certain songs in arcade better, but then Gradius 3 SNES has a lot of songs that are just insanely good. Lucky Zone and Mechanical Bass, I think, are two of my favorites. And even, like, Everlasting and Good Luck, which are the continue and ending themes, those are also really, really good. The bonus stages are a nice touch as well. I like how they have different requirements to enter them, which really is the same for a couple other of these games, but it's like, they do boost your score by a lot, but I don't usually take them because I don't like having all the extra lives. And then arcade mode is a nice touch, even though it just bumps up the rank by a little bit. I'm give up your appellations, Technical Monkey. That's the last thing I'm going to say. Yeah, this game definitely improves on it in some ways, but also just kind of lacks some of the creativity that the arcade version has. So I think of them roughly the same. Okay, Gradius 4. I'm not going to let this be a skill issue. I'm putting this game in A tier. This game is ridiculously hard for me. I imagine for some people it's easy as pie, but the rank system in this game is just brutal. Because it uses sort of like the counter-based rank system, where the longer you stay alive, the faster rank increases, but it also decreases per death, which wouldn't be a problem if this game's extends weren't sparse. So it's like, you really got to be careful with where you die, and you really got to make sure you get a lot of extra lives. And then you have the first checkpoint of the base stage, which is just flat out unrecoverable, and I die there almost every single time. But maybe that's just a skill issue. That I'm putting this game in A tier anyways, just because, first of all, the graphics, amazing. Like, I think the Gradius 4 is another game that I think gets a pretty bad rep. Yeah, the vertical mines are kind of... The vertical mines are really good, but the problem is that the armor piercing is completely useless. So when you use Type E, which I do, you just stick with the normal shot for the entire game. But people give Gradius 4 a lot of shit because it basically just kind of takes from previous games in the series, especially Gradius 2. But I think it differentiates from those games enough to make it feel unique to me. And then the music, and like, Demeter is the best song in the game, and one of the best Gradius songs in general, which is the Stage 2 theme. And it just has a lot of really great songs in general. I like some of the ambiance behind some of the tracks. And even if the rank system is kind of stupid, the stage design is really, really good. I love some of the stage design in this game. Especially, the Sal stage is probably the hardest stage in the game, but I think it has some really cool gimmicks. The bosses are usually really good. I like the regenerating Moais in Stage 5, even if they can get pretty annoying. And then the base stage where you turn 90 degrees is it 90 degrees? I think no, I think it's 90 degrees. I don't fucking know, but that's kind of cool. It makes the stage a lot dumber, but I think it's a hilarious idea. So overall, I actually like this game. It's just I suck at it, so I get angry whenever I play it. But I won't let that deter from how well designed it is, and it definitely holds up well for being the last arcade installment if you don't count Otomedius, which I don't. Well, not for this list anyways. Alright. Gradius NES. Okay, well, I'll just go ahead. Okay, I'll do the other two versions of Gradius. So NES Gradius, D tier. Like I said earlier, I'm not generally a fan of NES games in general. And actually, C tier. I like Gradius Arcade better, but NES Gradius, it's playable. It's not god awful. It's just that it's an NES port of a rather basic arcade game. There's not really a whole lot to say about it. Some of the secrets are kind of cool, I guess, like the warps and the bonuses and all that. But other than that, there's not really a whole lot to say about it. Now, Gradius PC Engine. I really want to put this game in A tier, but I don't know if it's that good. It's like I'm putting it in A tier. Mainly because of the music. Like, the music in this port is just fantastic. It works really easily. The best PC Engine Gradius soundtrack ever, if you don't count Gradius 2. Which I also didn't mention. Gradius 2 has the epic intro with Starlight. That's another really great song. But Gradius PC Engine, it plays a lot better than Gradius Arcade, and it has the extra stages, which is one of the best bangers in the entire freaking series. And it's a song that's pretty obscure too. And I think that song alone is part of the reason why it's up here. I have never watched the Salamander anime. I've never been an anime person in general, but I probably should watch it at some point. But yeah, it's a really, really good port of the game, and that's not even, and I love Gradius Arcade, but I just think this game just adds it. I think this game just kind of improves on it in a few ways that kind of bump it up a few spots. So there we go. All right, Gradius Rebirth, B tier. Gradius Rebirth is a really good game. I like how it sort of ties into the MSX games. All of the songs are basically, all the songs in this game are basically remixes of songs mostly from the previous MSX titles, which I think is a nice touch. It sort of alludes back to the storyline of those games. I think the one complaint a lot of people have with this game is that it's really short. It's only 5 stages long, and it's mostly based off the Game Boy version of Nemesis. But I still like it. I think the music is fantastic. A lot of the songs work really well with the Yamaha 2151 sound font, especially with stereo. I think this game, having a score attack mode, was really fun. I was a child prodigy of this game back when I was 11 years old or something. I have a few replays back from I don't even remember. It was 2012 or something. Yeah, and I think I have those uploaded on my channel actually. So check those out if you want. But it is short. But again, it's another really well balanced Gradius game in terms of difficulty, and it's kind of S tier game is godlike. A tier is really, really good. B tier is really good. C tier is just good. D tier is bleh, and then F tier is. I don't know if there's going to be any in F tier because I put this tier and these two games. That tier is mostly for these two games. But yeah, Gradius Rebirth falls into the category of I really like it, but it's not one of my top favorites. Alright, Jikyo, Strawberry Parodius, Forever with me. So this is the PlayStation, Sega Saturn, and PSP port. this one's also going in B tier. The music gives this game heavy pointers. So much better than the SNES version. And, like, I mean, I guess that's to be expected. And the game just plays so much better. Like, they definitely fixed a lot of the issues that the SNES version had. Like, the bosses generally take less time. The game is still relatively long, though. Like, a single loop is anywhere from, like, 45 to 50 minutes. Especially the higher loops. And, like, because this version doesn't have limited extends, you can rank up so many extra lives that it takes way too long to game over if you actually decide to play the higher loops, which makes doing high score runs of this game for me kind of an endurance test. But it's still pretty good. I'd say the game is fairly okay in terms of how the rank system works. It does feel a little bit more random than, like, the arcade games, but it makes the game playable, at least. And the Omega stages are super fun. The Omega stages are challenging to get satisfactory runs of, but they're super fun, and they feel super good to play, and they have great music. And just the choice of characters is just so bizarre. Most of them suck ass, but there's a couple good ones in there. Like, I use Sue, even though she's literally just the Vic Viper, but with a reversed power-up meter order. Now, I will say Jikio Strawberry Parodius does introduce a lot of cool ideas. Like, for one, this game is fucking littered with power-ups and bells. Like power-up and bell opportunities, so it's way too easy to rank up bell chains. You don't even need the purple ball for anything. Trying to think of any cool ideas there are. Wow, I'm blanking. I'm blanking on stuff. I don't know. It's just overall a really cool game. I love this version way more than the SNES version, as you can tell. But it's not quite up to the tier of Gokusho Parodius, even though it's way easier. But I'd say it has comparable music and comparable design. It just feels like it drags on a little bit more. All right, Nemesis 2 for MSX. So I have actually played this on a Salamander portable. This is one of the few games on this list that I have not properly 1cc'd yet. I'm going to give it C tier. For an MSX game, this is very well designed. Very intricate. I think the MSX games have a way more intricate storyline than they need to have, but it does kind of help tie all these games together into, like, the lore. I do think the story is pretty captivating. I said this earlier, but all of the MSX games have insanely good music, and Nemesis 2, I'd say Nemesis 3 has a better OST. It's not on this list because I've never really properly played it before, but Nemesis 2 is still really good. I think Nemesis 2 definitely did a lot of things right, especially when it comes to the power-ups, because you have the hidden power-ups that have the time limit that are in certain stages. You can go into the core ships in order to invade them and steal power-ups from them, which is really cool. And then just, it makes the game longer and tedious, but the whole Ghosts and Goblins aspect where I think it's Ghosts and Goblins, where you beat stage 7 and then you have to play through the first 6 stages, but in reverse. Obviously, it makes the game unnecessarily long, and Nemesis 90 Kai does it better, where you skip a couple stages and do a couple new ones, but I still think it's a cool idea, where you have to, it especially works with a story, I think. The main issue with this game is that it does suffer from the inherent MSX limitations, like the blocky scrolling, and I don't mind the graphics too much. It's also just really hard. Maybe because I just haven't played it enough. I've never gotten past Abaddon, which is the warship on stage 7. I should probably try this game a little bit more, though. Maybe see if I can get better at it. But I still think the game is really cool, and it's definitely one of the more, again, it's a definitely more ambitious project. If I were to put Nemesis 3 on this list, based solely on what I've seen of the game, that would probably go in B tier. I just like that game way more. Basically. Okay, so now we're getting into the versions of Parodius Da, because I decided to include all five of the versions I've played. So, how do I want to rank the arcade version of this game? Because I've only really played the PlayStation and PSP ports of the game, which have toned down, which like way toned down the rank compared to the arcade version, which makes this a much fairer game. But at the same time, if I rank it based off that, then it doesn't really feel like I'm ranking it based on the arcade version. So I am going to take that. I think the farthest I've made it when I played the game on MAME, like, I don't know, probably 8 years ago or something, would have been stage 8. I haven't tried it in a very long time, though. Yikes, this is tough. I'll take the arcade version into account, even though I've barely ever played it. I'm gonna also put this in B tier. It's kind of like Gokujo and Jikyo Strawberry, just on a lesser scale. Where it's the first Parodius arcade game, so obviously it's not quite as crazy as some of the later ones. Music is, I'd say, again, not as good as Gokujo or Jikyo Strawberry, but still absolutely incredible. But I do. And, like, the PSP port is probably one of the more fun games to play because of how balanced in difficulty it is. And how, like, they made the rank system not completely bullshit. Which I don't know why they, like... Okay, so the PSP version does have the, like, difficulty rise setting, where you can adjust how much the rank rises. But for Gokujo and Sexy, if you leave it default, it's just like the arcade version, whereas for Da, it's still toned down. And I don't quite get that. But, well, it's like, why'd you do it for Da, but not the other two games? I guess because Da was more stupid, but... I should really download MAME at some point, so I can properly play the arcade version of Da, unless it gets released on Arcade Archives, which I don't know if it will or not. Hopefully it will, but... I don't know. And then one of the fun things about the Parodius games, I like the different characters, even though I'll usually just stick with one. We'll get to NES Da. I think that's the second to next game. I'm not generally... I don't really care for the explicitness of the Parodius games. I usually just kind of ignore it, like with the Showgirl. Like with, what is it, Chinchibita Rika? I think that's... I don't know if that's her official name or not, or just Rika. I usually just don't really pay much attention to that. Or Kaori and Sexy Parodius, where you can literally just see almost her entire bare ass. Like, why? I think the game is obviously called Sexy Parodius for a reason, and then Da SNES, when they brought that over to like the PAL territories, they actually censored a lot of stuff, especially with especially like that one painting that's uncovered in like the Gumball section of Stage 3, which I don't even remember what the name of the painting is, but yeah. So I generally like the Parodius games. I think they're definitely like kind of acid trips, but if you can kind of get past that, they're really good games to play, even if they can get kind of bullshit sometimes. Yeah, that's the point of the name, Parodius. Okay, Parodius Da Game Boy. I actually 1CC'd this game the very first time I ever played it. It's probably the easiest version of Parodius Da, if I'm going to be honest. C tier. It's pretty good, I'd say, for a Game Boy port. It's better than the NES version, for sure. I'll go ahead and place the other versions now. So NES, I'll give that D tier. I feel bad for putting the NES port in D tier, because I actually don't hate it that much. It's just not that good of a port compared to the other ones. SNES gets B tier. because it's basically just the arcade version, but it actually runs well on the SNES. And I think it's aside from like the compilations, it's the only console port that includes every stage, and then it adds the shower stage, which is just fucking amazing. And then PC Engine is C tier. It's okay, but not great either. I think Game Boy has better music than the PC Engine port, but the PC Engine special stage themes are really good. SNES probably has the best music overall because it's very close to the arcade version. And then NES has similar problems to Gradius 2 NES, where it's just kind of slow down hell, and they had to cut out a lot of stuff to make it fit on the hardware, which kind of detracts. And my other problems with .NES are there's like 2 checkpoints per stage, which makes recovering really stupid. And bell chains reset after every stage, so you can't keep bell chains going, which is really annoying. And a lot of the songs are in the wrong key, which I hate for console ports of arcade games, especially NES ports. I think they should make efforts to keep them in the same keys. I can understand why they would change them, maybe for copyright reasons, but it's still dumb. Like, other games that don't use copyrighted music do it, and I don't like it whenever they do that. And Gradius and like the other NES games are also guilty of that. So, like I said, Game Boy is probably the easiest of them. And it actually plays relatively well for being on the Game Boy. Like, again, they did cut a lot of stuff, but I'd say they cut more stuff that made sense, maybe. And it just feels like a better port than the NES port was. PC Engine, I feel bad for the PC Engine port because it's not bad, but the fact that they cut out both the Moai Battleship stages and the underwater stage, and then they included, like, when they clearly had room for the special stage, and then Gradius PC Engine and Salamander PC Engine had room for the entire game, and then the music, most of the music in Parodius PC Engine is subpar at best compared to the other versions. And also, I think they tried to mimic the rank of the arcade version, so it kind of turns into bullet hell in some of the later stages if you don't manage it properly. But I don't mind it that much. Okay, Salamander 2. This is gonna be a hard one for me. Oh boy, I'm all over the place with this game. I honestly don't know what to think. Like, Salamander 2 has probably the most bangers in its entire soundtrack. Like, it's up there with Gaiden for having an insane amount of just absolute bops. And some of the game mechanics are super innovative, like the shit you can do with the options and you can use them as heat-seeking missiles and the option seed aspect. And the stage creativity is unique, if not a little bit blandish, I'd say, because it's like, there's just 2 or 3 just organic stages. There's just a couple stages full of battleships. So it's not really anything, there's not really a whole lot in terms of variety. But the rank system in this game is just so annoying. What game debuted the option hunters? That would be great. That would be this one. That's Arcade Gradius 2. Salamander 2 doesn't actually have option hunters. But Salamander 2's difficulty, like, the rank just increases so rapidly no matter what you try to do. And it's like, you have to be a whiz at shoot-em-ups to be able to dodge everything in this game. And it just gets really, really fast really, really quickly. It's such a hard game to 1cc because, like, the final boss is literally bullet hell, which is not a common thing in these games. If you've never played any of these Gradius games before, most of them the final boss just doesn't do anything, and you can kill it easily. It's kind of like a running gag. But this game has a hard final boss. I can barely one loop this game, And I don't know how anybody who can 2-loop clear this game is human. But I like the creativity and I like the songs. The unused songs in this game, especially Fire Tripper. Like, Fire Tripper is one of my favorite video game songs ever. And then you have Silvery Wings Again, Sensation, Speed, Dear Blue. All of those are just great songs. Even like Serious, Serious, Serious is really good. I don't consider ZXX to be part of the series. It's just a random game they threw on Salamander Portable. Because they needed a 5th game. I'll give Salamander 2 B tier. I'd say the difficulty kind of cancels out with the creativeness of this game. And also for a 1996 arcade game, it looks and sounds very good, just overall. So I'll put it there. Okay, so I'm gonna do Salamander and Life Force JP together. So I'm gonna put Salamander in. These are the arcade versions. I'm gonna put Salamander in C tier. I'm going to put Life Force JP in A. So, Salamander and Life Force US I'm going to kind of treat as the same. I have played both, but Life Force JP is actually kind of a different game, so I had them separate. I'm putting Life Force higher than Salamander for a few reasons. One is that this game is just much more polished than Salamander. They patched a lot of the bugs, like mostly with like the force field and all that, or the shield, or however you want to call it. I think Thunderbolt, Slash Fighter, and Combat are much better songs than Fly High, Starfield, and Burn the Wind, but I still like those songs. And honestly, just the fact that both these games have as many unused songs as they do is just hysterical to me, and a lot of them are actually really good, which is kind of a bummer. The games are relatively short. Salamander just feels very, very clunky in general. You basically just have to be powered up throughout the entire game or you're not going to beat it. Center Core is just completely fucking broken. It just spams cores endlessly until you die. Unless you have like a consistent method for doing it, which thankfully I kind of do. It doesn't give you any extends unless you credit feed, which Life Force JP fixed. This game does give you extends, which is another plus. This game uses a more traditional power-up system, which makes it a lot more in your control. Salamander's power-up system doesn't really help you when you're in a dire situation, because it uses the automatic power-up system, but the power-ups are set in stone, which is one thing Salamander 2 actually doesn't do, is that it has randomized power-ups, sort of. Whereas this game, they're always the same every single time, and they're few and far between. Life Force adds a few. And this game, it doesn't play as well. But I enjoy Life Force way more than Salamander, but I still like Salamander. Both games in general have really good soundtracks, but they're also both fairly challenging, mostly just because of how fast they are. And the other thing that all the Salamander games have going for them is the transition between vertical and horizontal stages. The alteration between them. I don't know how many other shoot-em-ups do that, but I think that's a really cool idea. It's kind of out of place compared to all the other games, and it's not even that disorienting either, which I like. You would think that it would be super hard to adjust to, but it really isn't. Life Force is okay. Life Force US is just Salamander, but with altered backgrounds and added voiceovers, and then Life Force JP reskins a few things, but keeps the same stage design, the same stage design, and the same basic gameplay mechanics. It just reskins a lot more stuff and replaces a couple of the songs. They are basically the same base game, but I treat them as two different games, and especially for the sake of this comparison. Right, so Salamander PC Engine. All right, well, Life Force NES is D tier. I don't like this game all that much. It plays too slowly compared to the arcade games. Some of the stages just feel like they drag on for way too long. The music is meh, as is the case with all other NES music, and it just doesn't play. It plays well, and it's not a very hard game. But Especially if you use the Konami code to gain 30 lives, which I don't because I'm not a wuss. Skill issue. I know, but it's just kind of where I land with it. It's a mediocre port at best. I know a lot of people have nostalgia for this game, and I totally understand that. It's just that I put this game sort of on a pedestal compared to the other, like more higher quality versions of the game, like this one, and I just don't think it holds up as well. But it's not a bad game, which is why I'm not putting it in F or the bottom of the barrel tier. Okay, Salamander PC Engine. Ooh. I think I'll put this one in C tier as well. I don't like that this game uses the checkpoint system instead of the instant respawn system of the original game. The music is kind of all over the place. Some songs are just okay, and then Starfield just slaps. And of the PC Engine games, it seems like it's the least faithful because they actually altered some of the stage layouts and altered some of the bosses, which just doesn't feel like a Gradius PC Engine port to me. They did patch some of the mechanics, though, like power-ups and the shield and the options actually behave somewhat as intended. But then the bosses just take way too much HP. It's an okay port overall, but... And I should also mention, these tiers are not ordered. I'm just slapping everything on there, but I do think the arcade version is better than the PC Engine version, but only slightly. The PC Engine version is a lot more playable, which makes sense, again, because it's a console game. Alright, Sexy Parodius. This is another game that's going to be very difficult. Ooh. The rank system in this game is just complete and utter bullshit. Like, I have not properly once CC'd this game with proper difficulty settings because no matter what, when you get to the final stage, there's going to be every enemy shoots 2 suicide bullets, and the second suicide bullet always comes like a second late. It's just so fucking hard. This game's soundtrack is definitely one of the better Parodius soundtracks. It's like, I'd say it's on par with Gokujo and Jikyo Strawberry for sure. Maybe even a little bit better. I don't like that it's like a little bit more explicit, and I think I have mixed feelings on the whole mission aspect. It's a cool concept, but it feels kind of random to just insert it into a shoot 'em up, especially one like Gradius, which doesn't usually operate on that sort of thing. And then there's also the whole like branching paths where you can get different stages depending on whether you succeed or fail in certain missions. But in order to get the special stage, you can't fail any missions, so that's kind of dumb. Although I think Okuja Parodius might operate similarly. It is pretty fun, but I've tried like doing a test play through this game with save states. I just can't play the final level at high rank. I'd have to find a way, especially with the manual option setup. But I think if I played with auto, where you have instant respawns, I'd probably have a more fun time. But I like to have control over how I power up. So, I'll give it B tier. I'm not going to be cruel to it, but it's going to land right there. All right, Gradius 5. This is about whether this game goes in S tier or A tier. It's like very, very close to S tier, I'd say. I use Koitsu for Sexy Parodius, just because I like to be able to control the bells, but I probably should switch to Mambo at some point just to try it out, because apparently Mambo makes the game free or something. You know what? Okay, Gradius 5 is top of A tier. This is like the only thing that's ordered. I don't think it's quite S tier, so Gaiden's going to be up here alone, but Gradius 5 is really close. Definitely the most graphically enhanced Gradius game of all time. It's sad that I'm saying that because this is a PlayStation 2 game from 2004. It just goes to show how dead this franchise is. But this game's stage design is very lacking in variety. It just has a self stage, and then everything else is just bases, mostly, with like a gimmick or two added here and there. The music I like. The music is interesting. For the choice of music style for this game is kind of interesting. There's a lot of like mixture of orchestral and techno music. I think Impregnable Fortress is probably the best example of that. It works well, if not kind of feeling a little bit inconsistent. I don't generally like songs that have like inconsistent rhythms or melodies or whatever, but I think Gradius 5 does it okay. It definitely has a lot of great songs. Like a lot of the old boss theme remixes, especially for like Aircraft Carrier and Dark Force, and even Take Care, honestly. The main boss theme is good. The Elephant Gear music is probably the best song in the game. And then probably one of my favorite parts of this game is the whole time travel concept. I love how whenever you play stage 2, it saves your inputs and then plays them back in stage 8. I love that, because you can, not only is it just hilarious and it looks so fun to watch, you can also use it to help yourself when you play through stage 8, and I always like to do that. The option control mechanic is really good, and I actually say the option controls are somewhat imbalanced as well. Freeze is obviously the best one. I think directional probably takes a close sec. No, freeze is probably the best. Spacing is probably second best, and then directional and rotate. But I think you could reasonably play the game with all of them. Also, I think the fact that weapon edit being where most of like the like variety and power ups comes from is kind of dumb. You have to like beat the game once in order to unlock it. Until then, you're stuck with like very limited type select. But I usually just play with the regular laser anyway, so why am I complaining? And then I think this game really nails it with boss design. I think the boss fights in this game are definitely difficult, but they have really fun attacks and really creative patterns to learn. I also like how it's cool that you can choose between checkpoints and instant respawns, because that kind of gives you like which style of gameplay do you prefer. I don't even know. I know Treasure was involved with the development of 5, and I think was mostly responsible. I don't know what Konami did for this game, if anything, but Treasure definitely did a good job at this game. It's not a complete bullet hell until you play on the higher loops, but at that point you're just asking for it. Again, the stage variety is like the lack of stage variety, like there's no Moai stage or Volcano stage, it's kind of a sticking point, but I don't mind it too much. And the game just looks and sounds really nice, and it plays really well too. So, again, I think Gradius 5 is like top of A tier. It's not quite up to the standards of Gaiden, but it's another one of my favorites. I'd love to play this game more. I'd love to do more high score runs or like multi-loop attempts of this game, because this game slaps. I just haven't had a whole lot of motivation to play any of these games lately. So yeah, that's about it. So that's all the games that I've really spent any amount of time invested in playing. I think this is a pretty solid tier list. I'd stand by this for sure. Konami just published it, and Konami and Treasure and G-Rev developed it. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, because I think, what was it? M9? Was that the company name? Was that the one that was involved with Gradius Rebirth? I don't even remember. So, overall, I'd say I stand by this tier list. This is pretty fun. Nice use of my time. So I think I'll go ahead and stop there.